I just lived through every parent's worst nightmare. At dawn, Child Protective Services showed up at my door, armed with a court order to take my sleeping 5-year-old twins. And the so-called danger? According to our HOA sidewalk chalk, they called it endangerment. The only thing truly in danger that morning was my restraint. I barely stopped myself from slamming the door in the officer's face. Let me rewind to the knock that nearly ripped our family apart. What I remember first wasn't a loud noisy, just a soft, polite knock on the front door. Way too early for visitors. The sky was still that pale gray you see right before sunrise. My wife, Sarah, was still asleep upstairs. Leo and Mia, our twins, were likely lost in dreams of dragons and rocket ships in their matching beds. The whole house felt calm, like a safe haven. That gentle knock, thought it was like someone quietly leaving a bomb on our doormat. I shuffled down the stairs barefoot, already half thinking about coffee, expecting maybe a package delivered at some odd hour. But when I opened the door, there were two strangers waiting, a man in a cheap suit and a woman who looked exhausted, holding a clipboard. Neither of them smiled. Parked by the curb behind them sat a plain black car and a police cruiser, lights off but still threatening. "Mark Peterson?" the woman asked in a flat, business-like tone. "That's me," I said, still gripping the doorknob. A chill spread in my gut. Police at the door before breakfast is never good news. "Can I help you?" She flashed a badge. "I'm Miss Albright with Child Protective Services. This is Officer Miller. We have an emergency court order to take temporary custody of your children, Leo and Mia Peterson." Time seemed to freeze. Birds stopped singing. The air felt heavy, and I swear my heart stopped beating. I could only stare at her, the words barely making sense. "Take my children? My 5-year-olds?" It sounded absurd, like someone announcing the sky had turned plaid. "I'm a family law attorney. I've comforted clients living through this nightmare, but I never imagined it happening on my own front porch." "You're what?" was all I could manage, my voice cracking and thin. "Sir, please don't make this difficult," Officer Miller said calmly, resting his hand near his belt. "Not aggressive, just matter of fact. We have a judge's order, based on an emergency petition for endangerment." Endangerment? My mind raced. Had one of the twins tripped on the swing set yesterday? Ate too many sweets? What on earth could they call endangerment? I am the dad who makes them wear helmets to ride tricycles on the lawn. I cut grapes into tiny pieces. I read every cereal label. Sarah and I built our entire lives around keeping them safe. This had to be a terrible mistake. "There is no endangerment here," I said, my voice firming up as shock turned into anger. "My kids are perfectly safe. They're upstairs, asleep. We need to see them." "Sir," Miss Albright insisted, her gaze drifting past me into the house. "The order is effective immediately." That's when Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching her robe, her face still puffy with sleep. "Mark, who is it?" she asked. Then she noticed the officer, and all color drained from her face. She hurried down the stairs, gripping my arm, voice shaking. "What's happening?" I turned to her, trying to look calm even as my hands started to tremble. "A broken bar. They think the kids are in danger. They have a court order to take them." Sarah gasped a sound that felt like a punch to my chest. She looked at the strangers on our porch, then back at me, eyes wide and terrified. "No," she whispered. "That can't be real. Who would do something like this?" Miss Albright held out the clipboard. The petition was filed by a neighbor, Ms. Karen Fletcher. Karen, the name hit like a slap. Karen of the HOA president, the queen of petty complaints, the one who sent passive-aggressive notes about trash bins and lawn height. Karen, who'd measured our grass with a ruler and timed how long the cans sat at the curb. But this was far beyond petty. I remembered our argument from last week, about the kids drawing on the sidewalk with chalk. She'd called it an unapproved property modification. I had laughed and told her to get a hobby. She glared at me, then at the twins, and said something I'd brushed off until now. "You'll regret being so dismissive of this community's standards, Mr. Peterson." "I'll make sure of it." At the time, I shook my head and walked away. But standing there, staring at the official paperwork, it hit me I had underestimated her. I'd poked a hornet's nest, and now the swarm was here on my porch, ready to tear my life apart. This was real. It was happening, and I had no clue how to stop it. We'd moved to this neighborhood for a fresh start at 2 years ago, leaving the city behind. I was burnt out from a decade in family law, back when I was a high-powered family law attorney downtown. The constant battles left me burned out. I'd spent years watching people tear each other apart over money, houses, and worst of all, over their own children. I had a reputation. They called me a shark, but winning those fights came at a price. Piece by piece, it ate away at my spirit. All Sarah and I really wanted was something simple, a quiet neighborhood, a backyard big enough for the twins to run wild, neighbors who'd wave as they drove by. We dreamed of an ordinary life here, and we thought we'd found it here, a neat little subdivision with manicured lawns and a community pool. The place looked like a magazine ad for suburban peace. What we didn't realize was that our picture-perfect neighborhood came with its own hidden warning label, and that label was named Karen Fletcher. She ran the homeowners association like a dictator in a freshly pressed pantsuit. The first time we met her, she was already on our freshly laid lawn, glaring at the moving truck. "That vehicle is in violation of Ordinance 7B. She declared without so much as a hello. "Commercial vehicles can't be on the street for over 4 hours. We'd been parked for 2. That was our warm welcome. From there, it was a steady trickle of nonsense. A notice because our garden hose wasn't coiled to her liking. A warning letter claiming the twins' colorful playhouse clashed with the neighborhood's earth tone aesthetic. Each letter dripped with passive-aggressive scolding, always hinting at fines. Our next-door neighbor, a big, friendly guy whose lawn looked like it belonged in a golf tournament, had tried to warn me early on. "Just smile and nod," he advised one afternoon, leaning over the fence. "Arguing with Karen is like wrestling a pig in mud. You both get filthy, but the pig enjoys it." He shared stories that sounded too ridiculous to be true. The time Karen tried to fine the Hendersons because, supposedly, their dog barked in a pitch she personally found irritating, or when she demanded that poor Mr. Gable repaint his door because it was, in her words, too cheerful. Nate's strategy was to pay the small fines and move on, treating her as a bizarre local phenomenon. One day, with a half grin, Nate told me, "Last month she sent me a photo of my trash can, said it was 3 inches too close to the sidewalk." 3 inches. I'm convinced she sneaks around at night with a tape measure and night vision goggles. She's less of a neighbor and more of a surveillance system in human form. But I've never been the smile and nod type. I'm stubborn by nature, and when I know I'm right, backing down isn't an option. Most of Karen's letters went straight into the trash. I thought she was harmless, a petty, lonely person desperate to feel powerful. The real showdown happened one sunny Tuesday. The twins were outside, turning our sidewalk into a rainbow of chalk doodles, crooked rockets, a purple dog, a lopsided green sun. Their laughter echoed through the yard. It was pure, harmless joy. Then, like a storm cloud rolling in, Karen's shadow fell over them. She strode across her grass as if leading an invasion. "What is this?" she barked, stabbing a finger at a pink unicorn my daughter had drawn. "It's art, Karen," I replied, walking over. "Chalk washes off. It's harmless. It's graffiti," she snapped back. "It drags down property values. The bylaws clearly state that exterior surfaces must remain in their original condition." I actually laughed out loud at the absurdity. "You're seriously threatening us over sidewalk chalk? Drawings made by 5-year-olds. They are unapproved property modifications," she hissed, her voice rising. "Remove them within 24 hours, or you'll be fined." That was the moment my patience finally snapped. I kept my voice calm, but every word carried the weight of anger. "Karen, go home, pick up a hobby, read a book, or just leave my kids alone. They're going to draw on the sidewalk if they want to, and this is my property. Now please, get off my lawn." Her face seemed to crumple for a split second, as if she couldn't believe someone dared talk back, but almost instantly, it hardened into something cold and hateful. Her eyes narrowed into sharp slits. She didn't yell, she didn't argue. Instead, she gave me that icy stare and spoke words that, at the time, I foolishly shrugged off. "You'll regret being so dismissive of this community's standards, Mr. Peterson. I'll make sure of it." Then she turned and walked away. I remember shaking my head, thinking she was just an overzealous busybody throwing empty threats. I even bent down and admired my daughter's unicorn, still smiling. Now, standing in my foyer, Sarah clutching my arm in panic, those words echoed painfully in my head. This was never about chalk, it was about power, and she had just played a card I never imagined. At last, Miss Albright handed me the petition. Her expression stayed neutral, but in her eyes I caught a flicker of whether pity, regret, or just the exhaustion of someone who'd seen too many families shattered this way. I couldn't tell. I took the papers and shaking hands. I took the stack of papers from Miss Albright. My hands were steady now. The fear was still very coiled not in my chest, but the part of me that used to stand in courtrooms was waking up. Fear doesn't win cases, facts do. I moved to the dining table, spreading the documents out like a general planning a counteroffensive. Behind me, Sarah hovered, her breathing ragged. "Let me make a few calls," I told her quietly. "Take the kids upstairs. Put on a movie. Keep things as normal as possible. They can't see us like this." She nodded, eyes wide and trusting, a trust I wasn't sure I'd earned in that momenta, and gently gathered our sleepy, confused twins to head upstairs. A minute later, the sound of cheerful cartoon music floated down, absurdly at odds with the wreckage unfolding below. Then I started to read, and what I saw made my stomach turn. It was worse than I'd imagined, a masterstroke of malice masquerading as concern. Karen had spun every innocent part of our daily life into something ugly and dangerous. The petition was pages of carefully selected legal jargon, almost certainly lifted from some website but applied with malicious precision. She painted me as a negligent, reckless father. She claimed the twins were routinely left unsupervised, citing the day Leo scraped his knee after falling off his bike, even though I'd been barely 10 feet away and scooped him up in seconds. She twisted the chalk drawings into something sinister too, describing them as proof that my children were forced to play on unsanitary, hazardous concrete rather than an inadequate, secured play area. There were photos, too. One showed our trash can slightly overflowing after the twins' birthday party, labeled as evidence of unsanitary living conditions. Another showed the kids splashing in a small inflatable pool on a hot day, with a caption warning of serious drowning risk due to lack of approved fencing. Reading it, my blood boiled. This wasn't just exaggeration, it was a calculated effort to trip every alarm bell Child Protective Services had. Karen knew exactly what words would scare a judge into signing an emergency order: unsupervised, hazardous, unsanitary, at risk. I understood the tactic all too well. I've drafted urgent petitions like this myself, though always based on real danger, not grudges. It's a legal sledgehammer, meant to yank children out of meth labs at midnight, not to settle petty neighborhood vendettas. But the law doesn't discriminate when you present it with the right trigger words. It reacts first, asks questions later. She was counting on that, counting on the panic and the shock to leave me paralyzed, counting on me being just another suburban dad, not the lawyer I used to be. But she'd made a critical mistake. She didn't know she'd picked a fight with a shark in his own water. I kept scanning the documents, looking for any crack I could drive a wedge into, and then I saw it. One photo in the packet caught my eye. It supposedly showed Leo, unattended, standing dangerously close to the street. But the image was off. The perspective didn't make sense. The light on Leo didn't match the shadows of the trees in the background. His outline looked too sharp against the softer background. I leaned closer, adrenaline sparking through me. I'd spent enough hours dissecting evidence in courtrooms to know a cheap Photoshop job when I saw one. The angle was impossible. The shadows clashed. It looked as though someone had cut a picture of Leo playing in the backyard and pasted him near the road. That was it. That was the thread to pull. Lying on a sworn statement is one thing, judges see it all the time, and you can argue interpretation. But fabricating evidence, that's a felony. That changes everything. She hadn't just lied, she tried to manufacture proof to back up her lies. And in doing so, she handed me exactly what I needed, a weapon to fight back. My pulse thundered. The hearing was set for 2 o'clock p.m.A. Barely 6 hours away. If I could prove that photo was doctored, I could tear down her entire narrative and show the judge what she really was, a vindictive neighbor abusing the law to settle a score. I looked up from the papers, heart pounding. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. This was a chance to turn her own game against Hira and find out what had driven her to go this far. I knew, deep in my gut, this couldn't just be about chalk on the sidewalk or a coiled garden hose. It was too calculated, too vicious. There had to be something bigger behind Dita, and I was going to find out what. The clock was merciless, each second ticking closer to the hearing that could tear my family apart. I had to move fast. My first call was to Sarah. I went upstairs and found her sitting on the edge of our bed, staring blankly at the wall. The twins were absorbed in a cartoon downstairs, brightly colored dogs solving mysteries, oblivious to the real one unraveling above them. "I found something," I said quietly, sitting beside her. I explained the doctored photo. For the first time since that knock on the door, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. "You can prove it?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I can prove she's a liar," I told her, squeezing her hand. "But I need more. This isn't random. There's something bigger here." Finkel, has she ever said anything strange? Any weird conversations? Anything that didn't add up? We sat there, mentally retracing 2 years of petty confrontations with Karen, a highlight reel of scowls, complaints, and sarcastic remarks. Then Sarah's eyes widened. "What about the security cameras?" she asked. "We have that one on the garage, facing the driveway. Maybe it caught something." It was a long photo, but it was something. I kissed her forehead, told her to stay strong, and hurried to my office. I pulled up the security feed on my computer and started scrubbing through the footage from the past week. Mostly mundane suburban moments: the mail carrier, a neighbor jogging by, a cat darting across the driveway. My finger was sore from spinning the mouse wheel, and frustration was creeping in when I finally saw it. 2 days ago, mid-afternoon, Karen, standing at the edge of our property by the back fence. She wasn't alone. A man was with her, gesturing toward our house and then the woods beyond. They were deep in conversation, the body language intense. My pulse quickened. They looked like they were planning something. I didn't have time to dwell. My next call was to Nate, the neighbor with a yard full of flowers and an opinion on everything. He answered on the third ring. "If this is about borrowing my edger again, the answer's still no," he grumbled. "Nate, listen, it's serious. It's Karen. She got CPS involved. She's trying to take my kids," I blurted out. There was stunned silence on the other end. "She did what?" "Jesus." I knew she was nuts, but "the's a broken bar." His voice lost its usual teasing edge, replaced by genuine anger. "What do you need?" "The sidewalk chalk argument," I said. "You were there, right? You saw it?" "More than saw it," Nate replied. "I filmed it. I was taking a video of my new petunias for my mom, and you two started arguing in the background. It's probably still on my phone." "Why?" My heart leaped. "Nate, that's gold." Her petition says I was screaming at her, that the kids were terrified and crying. "Not even close," Nate said. "You were laughing." The twins were asking her to draw a cat, and she looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "I'll find the video and send it to you right now." Direct proof she lied in her sworn affidavit. Combined with the doctored photo, my case was getting stronger by the minute. But the image of Karen and that unknown man by the back fence still nagged at me. What were they looking at? It wasn't just the house. They kept glancing beyond it, toward the woods. A wild thought took root. What if this wasn't really about my kids at all? What if it was about what lay behind the house? I sat back down at my computer, fingers flying across the keyboard and not searching for legal precedents this time, but county property records. The hearing was creeping closer by the minute, but I was getting closer to something bigger. The county's online system was slow and ancient, but I'd spent years digging through databases for divorce cases. I knew where the secrets were buried. I typed in Karen Fletcher's name and address. Her property file came up, on the parcel map. Her lot appeared neat and rectangular. Next to it was mine, and behind both was a strange, narrow strip of undeveloped land, owned by the county and zoned as protected green space. I dug deeper, planning board applications, meeting Minutessa, anything with her name on it, and then I found the jackpot. For the past 5 years, Karen had been trying to get the county to rezone that strip of land. Year after year, she filed proposals to turn it into a private community park and recreation area. And every time, The answer was the same: denied. The county insisted it was a critical watershed, not for sale or private development. But Karen hadn't given up. I scrolled further and found something more recent, an application filed just 6 months ago. And this only a broken bar was different. The new application wasn't just another hopeful petition scribbled together on printer paper. It was professionally done, complete with architectural renderings of her proposed park, manicured lawns, a tennis court, and an ornate fence wrapping around the entire perimeter. And right in the middle of that glossy plan, there was a fatal flaw, at least from her perspective. To make her dream park work, she didn't just need the county's strip of land, she needed access. A 20-foot wide easement that would cut right along the back of my property. Without it, the plan was dead before it ever got to committee. Suddenly, it all clicked into place. The puzzle pieces didn't just fit, they snapped together with a violent force that nearly took my breath away. This was never about sidewalk chalk, or a coiled garden hose, or the sound of children laughing too loud. This was a cold, calculated land grab. She'd tried to do it legally and failed. She probably tried to buy the easement from the previous owners, and they must have refused. And she knew I'd refuse too. I'd never sell a chunk of my yard so she could build her private country club. So she moved on to plan B. If you can't get the land from the owner, get rid of the owner. It was diabolical and brilliant in the most terrifying way. If she could get me declared an unfit parent, I'd be buried under legal fees and desperate to keep my family together. Maybe I'd have to sell the house just to afford the fight. Maybe the state would decide the property itself was part of the problem and force me out. Either way, the house would hit the market and she could swoop in, buy it through a shell company, and finally get her precious easement. And the man in the security footage, he wasn't just a passerby, he was probably a surveyor or contractor, already scouting what he believed would soon be her land. A chill crept down my spine, the kind that has nothing to do with air conditioning. This woman was willing to destroy my family, traumatize my children, and ruin my life, not out of spite or hate, but for a tennis court, for a bigger backyard. It was the kind of sociopathic greed you read about in corporate scandals, not something you expect to find lurking behind a white picket fence in suburbia. I glanced at the clock. Less than 3 hours until the hearing. I had a motive, proof she'd lied, evidence she'd tampered with photos, but it still might not be enough. Family court judges aren't juries, so they don't always look at what's likely. Their job is to protect kids first. They're trained to act cautiously, to err on the side of just in case. If the judge thought this was simply a messy neighborhood feud, he might grant temporary custody to the state to be safe. The thought sent a blade of cold terror through my chest. Sarah walked into the office carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She set one on my desk and gently massaged my shoulders. "How are you holding up?" she asked softly. "I know why she's doing this," I said, my voice flat. I explained the entire scheme, the fake park, the need for the easement, the manufactured crisis to force us out. I watched Sarah's expression change from fear to disbelief, then to a fierce, shaking rage. "So broken bar just so she can have a tennis court? She's willing to take our children away?" Her voice cracked, but it was edged with fury. "Monstrous doesn't even begin to cover it," I said. I looked past her, into the living room. Leo and Mia were in the middle of an epic stuffed animal battle, giggling behind the walls of a blanket fort, completely unaware of how close we were to losing everything. What would happen to them if I failed today? Even one night away from home, with strangers, could scar them forever. Sarah must have seen the dread on my face. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling but resolute, "we could just a broken bar leave, sell the house, move somewhere far away from her. Is this fight worth it? Is it worth risking even the smallest chance of them being taken?" For a moment, I felt the weight of her words. We could run, we could leave behind the lawn, the fence, the chalk-stained driveway. Let Karen have her damned strip of land. Our family mattered more. But then I looked back at Leo and Mia, lost in their game, trusting me to keep them safe from monsters they couldn't even imagine. And the question that had been quietly burning in the back of my mind all day came roaring to the front. How far will a father go to protect his family? Running wasn't protecting them. Running was surrender. Running would teach them that when a bully comes after you, you just hand over whatever they ask for and hope it ends. If we ran, Karen would win and she'd know this strategy worked. And what if she did it again, to the next family who moved in? What if she'd done this before? The thought slammed into me like a physical blow. My stubbornness and my refusal to back down from what I knew was right arose up in full force. "No," I told Sarah, my voice steady, stronger than it had been all day. "We're not running. I won't let her do this to us, and I won't let her do it to anyone else, ever again." I stood, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I'm going to end this, Sarah, I promise you." The fog of doubt cleared, the exhaustion melted away. I finally knew what had to be done. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number of my old law partner, Davy, a man who owed me a few favors from our years together. "Dave," I said as soon as he picked up, "I need you to dig everything you can find on a woman named Karen Fletcher, lawsuits, complaints, business dealings, sealed records, anything. I think she's done this before, and I need proof, fast." There was a pause. "Mark, you sound a broken bar different. What's going on?" "I'm in the fight of my life, Dave," I said, my voice hard. "Just dig." I ended the call. The moral crossroads was behind me. There was no turning back. Karen Fletcher had started this war, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Dave. His voice was low and serious. "You were right," he said. "Your Ho Queen has a pattern. A few years ago, there was this small cafe copyright next to her property. She tried to buy their lot to expand her yard. They refused. And suddenly, they were buried under anonymous complaints. The health department, zoning, the IRS, all bogus, but it drained them dry. The owner went bankrupt and had to sell. And guess who bought it through a shell company?" I finished for him, my heart pounding. "Exactly," Dave said. "Your friend Karen, the owner George Cromwell, tried to sue, but he ran out of money. The case was dismissed." "Can we prove those complaints were from her?" I asked. "They were anonymous," Dave replied. "It's smoke, not fire." "But it's a lot of smoke." He sent me Cromwell's last known phone number and address. "Be careful, Mark, she plays dirty." I didn't have time to drive across town. The hearing was creeping closer by the minute. I dialed the number Dave had sent me. It rang, and I was about to hang up when a tired, gravelly voice answered. "Yeah, Mr. Cromwell, my name is Mark Peterson. I think you and I have something in common, Karen Fletcher." There was a long silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end. "What about her?" he finally asked, his voice tinged with old hurt. I told him everything about the HOA, the CPS petition, the fake photos, and my kids. As I spoke, I could feel his anger rising, burning through the exhaustion in his voice. When I finished, Cromwell didn't hesitate. He poured out his story, how Karen had come to him friendly at first, offering to buy the cafe copyright. When he declined it because it had been his late wife's dream, she turned cold overnight. Then came the complaints, health inspectors during the lunch rush, zoning officials measuring patio space, tax questions, death by 1,000 paper cuts, Cromwell called it. Each complaint was anonymous, each one chipped away at him until he finally lost everything. "She's a viper," he said, his voice rough with bitterness. "She'll find your weak spot and strike, again and again, and she doesn't care who gets hurt." Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Her favorite trick is getting so-called concerned citizens to do her dirty work. Sometimes she pays them, sometimes she manipulates them. She even tried to get one of my young employees to lie about seeing rats in the kitchen." My mind flashed back to the security footage. Karen standing by the fence, talking to a man. He wasn't some contractor or surveyor. He was Alex's father. Alexa, the little boy Maria sometimes watched with our kids. I hung up with Cromwell, adrenaline buzzing in my veins. I opened the footage again, studying the man beside Karen. It really was Alex's dad. She wasn't just talking to him, she was recruiting him, grooming him as an ally. The realization turned my stomach. She wasn't above using another child to hurt mine. I grabbed my phone and called Maria, forcing my voice to stay calm despite the dread coiling in my chest. "Maria," I said, "it's Mark. I need to ask you something important, and it might sound strange, a broken bar talking to little Alex." "What were they talking about?" There was a pause. Maria was always careful, always professional. "Mr. Mark, I do not like to gossip about neighbors, she began, her voice hesitant. "Maria, please," I interrupted, desperation cracking my voice. "This is more important than you can imagine. It's about my children. About their safety." "Did you hear what she said to him?" Her hesitation melted away, replaced by quiet resolve. "Yes," she said, her voice low. "It made me very uncomfortable, so uncomfortable that a broken bar I recorded it. I couldn't breathe." "You a broken bar you recorded it?" I stammered, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My entire my family's future suddenly balanced on that single sentence. "Yes, Mr. Mark," Maria said, her voice calm and steady, a rock in the middle of my panic. I did not trust her. "After she argued with you about the chalk, she suddenly became very friendly with Alex. The next day, I was sitting on the park bench. She thought I was listening to music with my headphones, but I was not. I heard what she was saying to him, and it was not right." Maria trusted her gut, and her gut had told her something was terribly wrong. Instead of confronting Karen, she'd quietly set her phone to record, letting the lens rest on her lap, angled up at Karen and the boy. "She asked him if you yell a lot," Maria continued, voice heavy with quiet anger. "If you leave him and the twins alone outside." She told him, "It's okay, you can tell me. He's a bad man, isn't he?" She kept pushing him, and then a broken bar she offered him a big toy truck. She told him if he was a good boy and told the nice lady from the office what she wanted, she'd buy it for him. My stomach twisted. This was it, the smoking gun. This wasn't just false accusation, it was calculated witness tampering, coaching a child to lie, a line so dark and deliberate that no judge could possibly look away. "Maria, you're a lifesaver," I breathed, dizzy with relief. "Can you send me that video right now?" "I am sending it as we speak," she replied. "I am so sorry, Mr. Mark. I did not know what she planned." "I will do whatever you need. I will come to court. I will tell them what I saw." "Just the video for now," I said, my mind already shifting into trial mode. "You've done more than enough." "Thank you, Maria." "Truly." Moments later, a new email arrived. I opened the video. It was a bit shaky, shot low from Maria's lap, but the audio was perfect. There it was, Karen's syrupy voice dripping poison, her questions twisting an innocent conversation into a weapon. The boy's voice was confused, small, and then, clear as day, the bribe. I stared at the screen, my hands cold and steady. It was the most damning evidence I had ever held in my career, and it was mine. I saved the video to a flash drive. The fear that had been gnawing at me for days vanished, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. She thought she could destroy us with lies, but she'd overplayed her hand. And now, I was going to bury her case, piece by piece, in open court. I looked at the clock. 1 hour until the hearing. I grabbed my suit jacket and the flash drive. When I stepped into the hall, Sarah was waiting. I didn't have to say a word. She saw it and my face and fear was gone. The despair was gone. "It's time," I said. "Let's go end this." She nodded, her own fear replaced by fierce resolve. We were done being victims. We were parents going to war. The courtroom felt small and stale, heavy with the smell of old paper and burnt coffee. Judge Harrison, stern and tired-eyed behind his bench, radiated quiet authority. Karen sat to the side, looking perfectly put together in a tailored pantsuit, her expression self-righteous and smug. Beside her, the overworked CPS attorney shuffled papers, already halfway convinced by Karen's narrative. Sarah took a seat behind me, her presence at my back as solid and warm as ever. I had chosen to represent myself. No lawyer could speak for me, not this time. The CPS attorney went first, reading Karen's petition aloud in a flat, practiced monotone. She described unsupervised children, dangerous conditions, and an aggressive father. Then she displayed Karen's photos, the overflowing trash bins, the kids in the inflatable pool, and finally the doctored photo of Leo, standing supposedly near the street. "Your Honor," she concluded, "this child is clearly left unsupervised, dangerously close to a busy road." Karen dabbed at perfectly dry eyes, a picture of false concern. It was almost impressive. Judge Harrison's brow furrowed. He turned to me, his voice calm but weighty. "Mr. Peterson, these are very serious allegations. What do you have to say for yourself?" My heart pounded, but my voice was clear and steady. "Your Honor, They are serious. They're also malicious, defamatory, and provably false. Miss Fletcher has not come here for the welfare of children. She has come to perpetrate a fraud on this court. Karen gasped, hand over her chest, playing the victim to perfection. I ignored her. Stepping to the projector, I pointed to the photo of Leo. Let's start here, I said, my voice calm. I'm a family law attorney, not a photography expert, but even I can see this image has been manipulated. I paused. Then I brought out my evidence. I stepped closer to the projector, displaying enlarged screenshots of the doctored photo. Your Honor, notice the inconsistent shadows, the unnaturally sharp outline around my son, the mismatched pixelation between him and the background. This isn't a photograph, I said, my voice firm. It's a deliberate fabrication meant to deceive this court. Judge Harrison leaned forward, studying the images intently. For a moment, I caught a flicker of interest on his otherwise stern face. Sensing the shift, I pressed on. Next, Miss Fletcher swore under oath that I was screaming at her last week, frightening my children. Luckily, a neighbor recorded the exchange. I played Nate's video, the courtroom filled with the sound of my easy laughter. My daughter's small, cheerful voice asking Karen to draw a cat. The footage showed the truth. Karen was the aggressor, while I, at worst, was merely dismissive. The judge's gaze turned cold and fixed on Karen. She shifted uncomfortably, her composure starting to crack. And why, Your Honor, I continued, would Miss Fletcher go to such extremes? Why lie, fabricate evidence, and risk perjury? I handed over county records, property maps, and documents. Because she wants my land. Her planned private park requires an easement that runs directly through it. This was never about my children's safety, it was about her ambition. And she was willing to destroy my family to get what she wanted. The courtroom fell into a heavy, charged silence. The CPS attorney, previously certain, now looked at Karen as if seeing her clearly for the first time. The judge's brow furrowed. Karen's smug confidence had vanished, replaced by a pale, desperate fear. And finally, Your Honor, I said, my voice dropping lower, the most troubling part of all, Miss Fletcher tried to manipulate a child to lie for her. I held up a flash drive. This video, recorded yesterday by a neighbor, shows Miss Fletcher bribing a young boy to tell falsehoods. I played the clip. Karen's syrupy voice filled the room, urging the child to accuse me in exchange for an expensive toy truck. Her words dripped poison. The child's confusion was painfully clear. When the video ended, the silence was absolute. Karen had shrunk back into her chair, face ashen. The CPS lawyer recoiled, visibly horrified. Judge Harrison removed his glasses, polished them slowly, a calm so tense it was worse than shouting. When he spoke, his voice was low but edged with steel. Miss Fletcher, he commanded, stand up. Karen rose unsteadily, drained of all her earlier arrogance. The judge's voice rose, word by word, powered by righteous fury. In 2 decades on this bench, I have seen anger, grief, even cruelty, but rarely have I witnessed such a calculated, malicious abuse of this court. You have not only filed a frivolous petition, you have committed perjury, fabricated evidence, and tried to corrupt a minor. He slammed his gavel down, the sound cracking through the room like a gunshot. This emergency petition is dismissed with extreme prejudice. You are barred from ever filing another motion against this family. He turned to the CPS attorney, his tone unyielding. I expect a full internal review into how this shan made it this far. Finally, he fixed Karen with a glare as cold as winter steel. I am referring this matter to the district attorney. I want charges brought for perjury, filing false reports, and witness tampering. His voice dropped to a growl. Bailiffs, take Miss Fletcher into custody. 2 officers stepped forward. Karen let out a strangled sound as the handcuffs clicked behind her back. Her eyes met mine wide, accusing, as if I had somehow wronged her. Judge Harrison turned to me, his expression softening at last. Mr. Peterson, I am deeply sorry for what your family has endured. You are free to go. Your children were never in danger from you. Then, he signed a permanent restraining order, forbidding Karen from coming within 500 feet of my family. It was over. We had won. Sarah rushed to me, tears in her eyes, and wrapped her arms around me. I held her close, feeling the crushing weight of fear lift from my chest. Together, hand in hand, we walked out of the courtroom, leaving the ruins of Karen's scheming behind us. When we pulled into the driveway, the twins burst from the house, laughing, Maria just behind them. They hurled themselves into our arms, giggling, oblivious to the war we'd fought for them. Their warmth and joy chased away the last cold memory of the courtroom. Across the street, I saw a police car park in front of Karen's house. Nate stood on his lawn, raising a can of beer to me in silent salute. He gave a slow, respectful nod. The whole neighborhood watched as Karina, once the queen of her pristine domain, was led away in handcuffs. She had tried to turn the law into a weapon to destroy my family. In the end, it was the truth and the law itself that destroyed her. Justice isn't always revenge. Sometimes, it's simply exposing the truth. And that day, the truth was more than enough.